Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scaleups, and Early Stage Businesses with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me. And our guest today, Kirk, is an entrepreneur in the restaurant space with a pretty compelling story to tell. He skinned this cat a little bit differently than most, and what he's accomplished is very exciting. Kirk, can you do an infinitely better job than I did in introducing yourself?
Thanks, Jerry. Hi, my name is Kirk Mauriello. I'm the CEO and founder of Profit Cookers, which is a virtual restaurant company that we bring to independent restaurant owners to help improve their profitability and bring them more business to grow their companies.
Now, we don't usually spend a ton of time talking about our guests' companies, but in your case, I would like to expand on it a little more just so people understand what that means. Because what I'd like to talk about is change in business and the things you've accomplished and how COVID changed your business. And in order for that to really land, I think they need to better understand Profit Cookers.
Sure. So Profit Cookers was born out of the idea of having virtual brands. So bringing new culinary options to the delivery market, through Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, which is a big market presence today compared to 5-6 years ago. And what we do is we have a business model that we take our brands and we can drop them into an independent restaurant's kitchen and drive the orders through the sales process that we provide to those restaurants. And the restaurants act as what's called a fulfillment partner. And then we pay the restaurants to make the food. So it brings an additional revenue stream for restaurants, utilizing the same assets and staffing, equipment, and inventory that they already have, which helps those restaurants improve their profitability.
So if I understand you correctly, if I've got Jerry Gadori's Americana Diner here in the incredibly rural Dudley, Massachusetts, and I decide to work with you, I would bring some of your menu items, or would I act as like a host kitchen for your menu? How would that work?
Yeah. So, most people understand what a ghost kitchen is.
Yes.
So a ghost kitchen technically is a location that acts and makes food for different brands that then get delivered to the consumers, or consumers go into that space and can order directly in the stores. With our model, what we do is we kind of turn the restaurant's kitchen into a ghost kitchen for our brands. Right. So we bring them the recipes, we bring them what the brand is, but we market the brand as its own restaurant online. So for instance, Badass BLTs is marketed as a restaurant. It doesn't exist in brick and mortar for someone to go in to order from, but the restaurant that we license to, their kitchen will make the food and the delivery drivers will go to that restaurant, pick it up and deliver it to the consumer.
Now I want a BLT, so thanks for that. So that's pretty exciting. So it sounds like what the local restaurant gets is added revenue, and then what your company gets is an expanded territory.
Yeah. So the whole point behind the brands is to, one, bring culinary options into the marketplace that are more defined, as opposed to having a big, large menu. The menus are very specific to the type of food. You can also then offer 8 to 10 different items within that food category, right? So Badass BLTs has 10 different BLTs. Pancake Paradise has 10 different pancake options, things like that. The restaurant would never have 10 BLTs on their menu. So this gives the restaurant the ability to now serve more culinary options from their restaurant and get paid to do that without it being marketed through their own restaurant, which would then create a whole thing. It also gives that restaurant a bigger footprint online for consumers to get orders from consumers that are out there. If you're a single restaurant, you might have a brand that your brand is, right? So Joe's Diner, for instance. Well, you're online as Joe's Diner. Well, then we come in and we bring in 10 new brands for that store that they can fulfill. And now they have 11 stores that are present online that the order flows to their restaurant. So the consumer might pick Joe's Diner once a week, but they might pick Pancake Paradise once a week. They might pick Badass BLTs once a week, right? So now that restaurant has the ability to get more orders from the consumers in the market.
It sounds like one of the ways that a restaurant can evolve in a changing market so they don't go the way of the shopping mall.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice part is because virtual brands are electronic, right? There's no paper menus, there's no signage, there's not all the stuff that you do in a regular restaurant. It is a very nimble machine that you're running, right? You have the ability to put a new brand up tomorrow. So we create new brands all the time, and then we go to those restaurant partners and say, "Hey, would you be able to make this food from this menu? What can you do?" And most of the time they'll say, "Yeah, we want to take that on too," because even if it brings them in another $500 a week in sales, it's $500 a week more in profit potential for them, from that sales. So, and if the kitchen's already making this and they already have the ingredients, why not make more food? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
the whole point is to get more productivity out of your employees. So the only way you're going to get more productivity is to bring in more orders. Right? Now, there's only a few different ways you can do that as a restaurant. You can sell online as your brand. You can market outside as a catering company and cater, or you can market to consumers to come through your door. Right? All of those involve a lot of expense to drive that business, a marketing expense. With our business, we do all the marketing, we do everything for them, and the restaurant truly ends up being a fulfillment partner. All they have to do is make the food. That's
really exciting.
Which is really what their core competency is as a restaurant. Every restaurant has trouble when it comes to marketing and how to market. And there's companies out there that say they'll drive them business and all this stuff, and it's just it just doesn't work that way for an independent restaurant like it does for the big box chains and stuff like that can put TV advertising and big advertising in newspapers and magazines and mailers and things like that. You can't do that as an independent restaurant because of the financial burden with it that comes along with it for the return on investment that you may never see, or you may never be able to figure out how to monetize that or figure out what is the ROI, right? And most of the time what restaurants will do is they'll do discounting, right, to get consumers to come in. So they're paying a marketing company to discount the food that they're selling. And that's just a lose-lose situation. You might drive consumers, but you're driving behavior of, I'm going to order at a discount when I go to that restaurant. I'm never going to pay full price.
Yes.
Well, with our stuff, we're marketing it, and all they're having to do is fulfill the order, which is a very key component of the process. And that's why they receive the lion's share of the dollars overall. And we guarantee a 30% profit margin above food costs to that restaurant. So if we can add 10 orders a day to 30 orders a day, that's between $300 and $1,000 a day in business at a 30% profit margin guaranteed. So the restaurants, it works very well for them, and they love it, the partners we have.
Yeah, discounting and coupons and 2-for-1 and all that business, it has its place, but I agree it's a dangerous way to gain new customers.
Well, I always looked at it as, because I was in the pizza business for a long time in Chicago, and the pizza business is a discounting business, right? So I worked as the COO of a company out of Chicago called Mauriello's Pizza. And when I went to work there, I put a model in place that was like, what are we doing here? So, their philosophy when I went there was, okay, we're going to raise the price. Well, then we need to raise the discount. And that was kind of puzzling to me. Like, why would you raise the discount if you raise the price? And they felt that went hand in hand. And I'm like, well, actually, what you should do is you should raise the price and lower the discounts. And they were like, well, who's going to order if that happens? I said, because the consumer that you have as a pizza chain is never paying full price. They're always using a coupon of some sort. Now, some consumers might, but as soon as you take one coupon, you've already discounted everything for the day. Like you didn't sell at full price. So what we figured out is when we took the EBITDAs from 6% to 18% by raising prices and lowering discounts, and the actual sales, nothing changed on the volume, just the profitability changed, right? The consumer used a $3 off instead of a $4 because they were trained to use coupons. So you needed to fix that. Now, what we found really interesting was that we didn't realize that we were the leader in the market when it came to the independent pizza chains in the Chicago market. We changed our discounting so that in the money mailers and those Val packs and stuff, well, a month later, all our competitors changed to the same discounts. So I was like, they think we know what we're doing.
When I was a kid, I worked in gas stations, and the managers first thing in the morning would go up and down Main Street and check everyone's gas prices and make sure they were all the same. And they'd change their prices to be like everybody else's, or maybe 1/10 of a penny less.
Yeah. Well, what's really funny, you bring that up. So when I got into the restaurant, I was in the electrical distribution business for a long time. And I got into the restaurant business and I started looking at the different models and how people determined what they were going to charge. And I found that 90% of restaurants that I worked with on the consulting side, when I asked them how they came with their pricing for their menus, was, well, the competitor sells it at that price. And I was like, but do you know how much you're paying for something? Like maybe your quality of the item you're buying is better than theirs. Maybe it's larger. Maybe it tastes better. Like, so why are you selling yourself short on something? And then we started to realize when we started doing some studies, asking consumers when they came into our restaurants, and this is when I went into the breakfast and lunch side. I was trying to figure out why is breakfast only always under $9? Like it made no sense. Like why would somebody not pay $13 for a skillet? It's a lot of food. And what we found was that it was just the restaurant owners felt like consumers wouldn't pay it. And I was like, well, let's figure that out. And so we start asking consumers, why are you coming to this restaurant? And what do you look at when you come in? And what we found was that, and this ended up going across the board in every type of restaurant, the consumer looks at the menu the first time they go to a restaurant. And they do a analysis of whether or not it's a value to them based on the price. Then they eat the food and then they really determine the value, right? But the second and third and fourth time they come in, they're not price sensitive anymore because they already know they can afford it. So I do an analogy of this. If you're looking to go out for steak, right, and you've been to Ruth's Chris and you've been to Texas Roadhouse, they both serve steak, right? Well, you know that Ruth's Chris is going to cost a certain amount. And you know that Texas Roadhouse is going to cost less than what Ruth's Chris is. So you already predetermined where you're going based on how much you're willing to spend on steak that night. Well, that happens in every business.
Yeah. If I could hop in there for a minute, I was just going to say, so I consult predominantly into technology companies, not universally true, but predominantly 65, 70% of my clients are technology. And one of the exercises that we go through is pricing, because there's different types of buyers. Some people are value buyers. They're looking to pay the least for what they need to get. Some are quality buyers. They need a very high-end product and not afraid to spend for it. Then others are speed buyers. They need this thing solved right now, and they'll pay a premium to get it done quickly. And I think food is shockingly similar. I know, if I'm rushing between meetings and to eat something, I care more about getting that food quickly than I care about it being exceptional. If I'm going to a Ruth's Steakhouse, I don't mind paying a premium for an incredible experience. And then other times, it really is just about value. I'm on a budget. I've got to fill my belly for that budget. So I think that there's some truth that people mentally categorize. I think we may have spoken about this before, but back before McDonald's priced itself out of the category, it used to be if you were in a hurry and you wanted to get some cheap food, you went to McDonald's.
Yes.
If you wanted a little better experience, you went to a fast casual like an Applebee's or a Chili's or something like that. And if you wanted something nice, you went to a real sit-down restaurant.
Yep. And that's just, I think that's just typical buyer behavior.
Yeah.
So figuring out what your business is and where you fall in that pecking order, right, is very important in how you market and who you market to. And the independent restaurant, the big boxes have figured it out, right? Like you talk about Chili's, you know where you stand, right? We consumers, they know exactly where they stand in the market.
Yes.
And, so independent restaurants, the independent restaurants tend to want to service everybody, right? It's a common thing that happens with owners of independent restaurants. They think that they need to do everything for everybody. And then what ends up happening is when you try to do everything well, you don't do anything good.
100%. That is the business
right?
truth.
And that's a thing that tends to happen with these restaurants. So where Profit Cookers fits in with with what we do is that the restaurants can focus on what they can do best for the service to the consumers that walk in the door, right? And then we bring a whole nother set of things, a business model to them. And it's really a business model what we're bringing today. Mm-hmm. It started off as just brands, but we've morphed it into a business model that once you understand what your role is and what you're capable of performing at your restaurant, we then customize that business model to drop it into your store. And that's what tends to be really successful about it. We're not trying to fit the restaurant into the program. We're taking our program and fitting it into the restaurant. And there's a big difference.
No, I love that concept. Essentially turning a restaurant to fulfillment center is genius. And I know that you work nationally. This is pretty darn innovative and exciting. How did you come up with this idea? You know, what was the genesis of this?
Well, believe it or not, I owned a restaurant in Plainfield, Illinois that was actually failing. And there was a company out there that I had a friend worked at called Nextbite. And they had created this model that they wanted to franchise of virtual brands. They had 3 brands and they wanted to franchise it. And they came to my restaurant and asked, you know, can you help us out with this? Like, we want to franchise this. And I was like, well, this really isn't a franchise model. This is really a licensing model, because you want to get a lot of restaurants to take on your food, but it's not franchising. You're not putting up signage and all this stuff. And you know, every market's so different in what you're going to be selling. Even though it's the same brand, there could be different menu items overall, as opposed to Dunkin' Donuts franchise as being exactly the same everywhere. And because it was a delivery only process, it didn't need to be exactly the same everywhere like a franchise does. And even franchises today have morphed a little bit in that Louisiana might have something different than Baltimore, that might have something different than LA, right? Like within their menus. Yeah. So my restaurant in Plainfield became the first licensed restaurant for their brands. And I saw what they were doing, but they were a technology company. So I decided to shut my restaurant down just before COVID, because it wasn't successful. We did very well online, but it still wasn't. I was like, you know, are we going to change what this restaurant is? Is it going to get better? Because once you get into a restaurant, it really doesn't change much unless you put something different or change the model. And I said, I'm going to really concentrate on this business model of these virtual brands and selling online. Well, then COVID happened. 3 months after I shut my restaurant down, COVID happened. And I was like, okay, now we have an opportunity, because everybody started calling me. I didn't have to convince somebody to take on brands. They needed business. Mm-hmm. So it just so happened that way. And then we started off with 3 or 4 brands, and now we have 30 that we bring to the market. Not all of them are super successful brands. Some are better in some markets. Some are better in other markets. A few of them are big no matter where we put them. Right. So we're learning a lot about the market and the type of restaurants that work best with them. But that's how we started it. And we've grown it by literally going to the restaurants and meeting with owners and showing them the model. And then now it's gotten to the point where we get a lot of referral business, because we have a lot of restaurants already. And then they have uncles and cousins and sisters and brothers that all own restaurants in other parts or on other things. And they're looking to add to their business. The goal and the key to it, the success, was making it simple. Right? It's the old KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid, right? And making it so that the restaurant that you're working with can perform making the food. A lot of our competitors that came into the market had the old idea of marketing is you need to make sure it's exactly the same. It's got to be like a franchise. It's got to be all this. Well, guess what? Like, an independent restaurant owner works best when they can act independently. And if you force them to work within rules, they will drop you in time. Mm-hmm. You know, they need to have autonomy in the marketplace too.
Yeah, it sounds almost like, if it's as profitable as it sounds almost like it would be worth it for a restaurant or someone interested in moving to that space to just open a commercial kitchen in an area that would support it, and then just not even have a storefront or any type of a dining room, just have a pickup area for Uber drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and you know, that is a model that can be done. If you were looking to build a restaurant and do something, if you're not looking at using also virtual brands within your business model, you're missing out on a huge part of the market. I mean, the best restaurants.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Kirk. That's what I meant was opening up a commercial kitchen, going to someone like you and your company and saying, I want to run these 10 brands out of it. And that's all they do. They don't have their own independent restaurant. They're just a kitchen.
Well, what's even nice is that they can have their own brand also. Mm-hmm. So they can have like what they specialize in. Maybe they wanted to open up a pizza place, right? But instead of opening up a pizza place with just the pizza equipment, put in a couple more things of equipment, and now you can do even more because of the virtual brands out there. So your revenue streams are totally different than just relying on somebody coming in looking for pizza, mm-hmm. right? and the best brands. And like I said, we're one company out there. There's a few of us out there. There's a lot of different brands. You can have the other company's brands also. If they have something that's specific that you want, like Mr. Beast was a big one that was out there. That was the one everybody talked about for the years in the beginning, right? Mr. Beast, Beast Burger, having in the restaurants. Well, yeah, I mean, if you follow the recipes and you make everything good, you have a lot of business. They do a good job of marketing that brand. Why would you not want to do that? Well, the reason is it has to be profitable too, right?
Yes.
So that's the part that a lot of the companies didn't understand coming out of the gate, was that if you want a restaurant to stay with you, you have to make it worthwhile. You have to make it profitable. If you think that somebody's just going to make your food so that you can make money, that's never going to work long term.
No, for sure. And, speaking of Mr. Beast, that does bring up the question, because he's been struggling so badly with it in many of his collabs. How do you control quality so that if I travel, for example, quite a bit for work. So if I recognize one of these brands and get it locally and love it, and then notice I can get it in my hotel room in Chicago too, and I obviously want to have a similar experience.
Yeah. So this was probably the hardest part of figuring out what to put on menus, right? So because the restaurants also have a unique set of ingredients, and you really don't want to make them bring in something that may not move. What if it doesn't sell? Then it's a waste. So we didn't want that to happen. So we made the menus very generic from a standpoint of the type of ingredients that are needed. We did more of a form, fit, function methodology, as opposed to this particular item needs to go on there made by this manufacturer or this food company. And so we went with okay, the bacon has to be this bacon. It has to be an Applewood smoked, and it has to be a 9/11 cut, right? So now there's a variety of brands that you can buy, because every part of the market doesn't have everything either. Like some markets have different brands and they don't relate to Southern California as opposed to New York City. Mm-hmm. So we had to do some things within the menus. So we tried to keep all the food very simple. So our brands are simplified items that a lot of people make at home, because that's where people kind of drive their thought process in what they're going to order. You're ordering online. It's a different process than ordering in restaurant, right? If you get food and you didn't like it, who do you go to? Like, you already got it at home, and who do you call? Who do you do? In a restaurant, you can talk to somebody and maybe they'll make you something different, or they'll do something. You can't do that online. So we made the food all things that people are more popular with, people that eat all the time. Even peanut butter and jelly sandwiches are one of our brands. Mm-hmm. And people would say that'll never sell. Well, I can tell you that we sell thousands of dollars a week of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So, why is that? Because people eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They just don't order it online because they weren't available online. Where do you go get them? Now they're available online. Guess what? People will order them. So, this big technology thing, big tech, using big tech data, all that. Well, that only works so far as what's out there in the market. You can only track what's sold if it's being sold. Mm-hmm. If it's not being sold, then so chicken wings, yeah, everybody has great data on chicken wings. But what's the data on breakfast sandwiches? If there's, because everybody wanted a chicken wing brand. So what we found is go for foods that work that way. Now, from a quality control standpoint, why does that work best? Because they're the most eaten type of foods around. You can control the quality by putting good restaurants on board, right? Vetting the restaurant properly, knowing what they make, giving them the recipes that are simple to perform, right? So that any of their cooks, your typical diner type of quick, what do they call it? Your quick service restaurants, but fresh made food, yep. Right? So your line cooks can handle it and they can make things. Now, understanding that it's not going to be exactly the same like a franchise. And the reason why is that, and why that works, is that online ordering typically comes from either home or work. Now, you brought up, hey, if I saw it and I was at my hotel, I could order it. Yes, that's a small percentage of the people that order online are in those situations. Most of the time when you travel, you're probably going to go to a restaurant that's local, or you're in that area and you might go out or you might stop in. But there are more and more people that are ordering online, even when they're traveling. Mm-hmm. But a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, on a croissant is going to be a bacon, egg, cheese sandwich on a croissant. Now, one store might be, maybe it's a little bit better or to your liking than another store is. But for the most part, you're getting it the same store is making it for that consumer almost every time because they're ordering from the same location, either home, and the store has a territory that's going to cover an area so that they're getting every order within that area anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how, a little bit different than the experience level of walking into a restaurant that needs to be the same like franchising, right?
No, 100%, 100%. So this business, if I'm understanding your origin story correctly, is really an outgrowth of the change that COVID brought to buying patterns in restaurant customers. Would that be accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Now, before COVID, the online ordering business was great. It was, but it was a small percentage of the overall business of a restaurant. Today, some of our restaurants do 40% of their business through delivery, online delivery. So you can see it changed a lot. Well, why did it change? Well, COVID changed it. So, like anything new that comes into the marketplace, it takes time for people to adopt the use of that technology, right? So when the iPhone came out, everything changed, right? Then everything became apps and using things. Well, then the food companies come out. Well, now you can order food. Well, before you had to call in or send a fax or do something like that. Mm-hmm. Now you can do it directly from your phone. Well, then COVID happens and you have no other way to order anything except that way. So all of a sudden everybody learns, oh, look at the ease of this. Look at how simple. They made it a very simple process. Click, 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 and it gets to you. I mean, it's amazing that it works in that way with all the touch points with a restaurant, right? By the time you order to the time you receive it from a driver, it's amazing how accurate it is for that process to happen. What you'll understand, though, is that COVID sped up that process by 5 years. The number of people that use that process now of ordering through an app on their phone or ordering food on their phone is, light years ahead of where it would have been if COVID didn't happen.
In an unrelated tangent, I will say I occasionally get nostalgic for some of the older technologies from when I was young, but the fax is something I do not miss. So let me ask you this. We've covered kind of a lot of ground. If you could give any one piece of advice to a business person, a startup owner, even an established business person, what would it be, Kirk?
Well, I think that the main thing is to stay focused on your business. Mm-hmm. All right. What tends to happen with entrepreneurs, but that I see, my experience, is they have an idea, they start a business, and they start to grow it. And then they get some ideas of, well, what else can we do? Right. And we've had those conversations internally at our company too. Like, okay, we have this company, we have all these restaurants. Okay, well, why don't we set up the technology piece so that we're not paying another company for their technology? And I always step back and I say, what is our main focus? What do we do? What do we make money at? And until we get to the point where there's no other opportunity to continue to grow that piece of it, why would we want to take ourselves off on a different tangent? Because once you do that, now you took yourself away. It doesn't mean that you can't morph and your company might morph into something else. You might find another opportunity, by doing something like that. You might, an offshoot might end up being the main part of the business, but focus on one of them. Figure out which one is the one that you want. You can't be everything to everybody, and you're no way you're going to be able to do everything perfect as best you can unless you focus on that. And I learned that being focused and say, we have something that we know we can get out there. We have something that we know that we have to convince certain restaurant owners, and some owners get it right away. But this is what we do, and we do it best. And let's just focus on that. And that has been our focus for 3.5 years now. And it's the best thing we ever did was stay focused. Had we gone off into other things, it would have pulled us away from that focus. And that's something that all entrepreneurs go through. I think they all think like, oh, well, what if we worked with these guys? Well, yeah, but what are you best at? Stick with what your core competencies are and be the best at it.
Yeah, I love that. And I talk with entrepreneurs all the time about creating a support network around them that can help them with things that either they're not ready to bring on board or it'll never be big enough that it's worth it. And I completely agree, because you use technology as an example. So let's say that you say, oh, we use cloud servers a lot. It's very expensive. we could bite the bullet, bring in servers and run this ourselves. But now you've got to develop an internal IT staff.
Yep.
And is that really what you're best served doing? The answer may be yes, but usually it's no. And I agree, the focus is key, because if you focus on what you do better than anybody else, then you are better than anybody else at that.
Right. And so this kind of goes back. Here's something interesting. So I had some conversations with one of our competitors, and we were talking, a couple of guys, we were talking about, like, we compete with each other from a standpoint of brands online and trying to get consumers to order those. But we don't compete from a standpoint of the type of restaurants we go after. So they primarily focus on enterprise type of businesses. So the Chili's and the IHOPs and stuff like that. So they had to create a complete internal technology team in order to be able to make sure that everything integrated with those companies' POS systems, right? Because those companies were big. If they brought on a brand, they put it into 500 stores. So it had to work differently. Where for us, we deal with independent restaurants. So if we had to tie into every POS system, holy cow, what it would cost. So we decided to go a different route. We went with our own technology, which is all tablet and printer technology, which is very simple. But the independent owner can do that. He doesn't need it to run through his POS system.
Right.
And he'd prefer it not to, because then it confuses his business with this other business. So we found that works better for us. But if we we outsource, we contract and outsource that piece of the technology. But like you said, if I brought that in-house, now what do I do when, something changes at DoorDash? My IT team's got to do all that, where I pay for that separately now. That company keeps it all up to date for me, right? And, so there's a give and take. There's a pro and con to it, right? What if the company doesn't do a good job? Yes, it could hurt us, right? But we vet who we have, and we make sure, and we keep up with it, and we make sure what's happening, and we're involved at a different level with them than we would be, bring it in internally. So, but the cost, you figure out what the cost would be, and then the responsibility on top of it. When you can outsource, I find that the outsourcing tends to be better.
100%, because to your point earlier, that company is doing what they do best and what they're focused on, which in your example, building a piece of software or whatever, that they're not trying to do 17 different things. No, I love that. So what was your biggest surprise in starting your company?
The biggest surprise, let's see, how fast we could grow.
Well, that's a good surprise.
The other thing that really surprised me was, you think that by using some demographics, you can figure out what a territory might do in sales. And it's so random, it's unbelievable. The smallest markets you think that wouldn't do okay, do well. And the biggest markets like Manhattan did different. Now we figured out why, right? Like more competition, more space, you're trying to get on that. You're trying to get onto that, be on the app in the right spots like Amazon, right? But you're doing it with Uber, DoorDash, and Grubhub. You want to be in the right spot. Well, when there's more competition, it's harder to get those spots. Hours of the day, depending on the market. Like, it's amazing how many people order food after midnight. Like, it blows my mind. But understanding now, my kids are in college and stuff like that, I get it. There's, we tend to think, and this is a big thing that I learned in this business. We tend to think in a marketing way about how we look at things personally.
Yes.
And the reality is, and I use this analogy now, if you go to the grocery store, there's 50,000 SKUs in the grocery store, right? And how many do you buy personally? 100, right? Maybe 200 max, right? But there's like 50,000. So somebody's buying the other ones. So there's a lot of people not like me, right? Yeah. And you have to be you have to be prepared to see that and understand it a little bit.
And I'll say, Kirk, you touched on something I talk about sometimes. As an owner, it's difficult not to project your values, how you buy, how you react to things. It's very difficult not to do that and then make decisions, making the assumption that everybody's like you. When in fact, as the founder of business, you're a tiny minority in the way that your brain is structured. You're probably the worst example of how other people do things, because business owners are so rare.
It's so true. So one of the things we would do, So when I started the peanut butter and jelly brand, people laughed at me. They were like, nobody's going to buy peanut butter and jelly. And I'm like, oh, listen, we're going to put it out there. So, and I said, it's a really simple thing for a restaurant to do. I mean, It's peanut butter and jelly. I mean, they already have everything there. Maybe they didn't have peanut butter. Well, buy a jar of peanut butter, right? So we put it into the restaurants, and all of a sudden in Manhattan, New York, we're getting a lot of orders. And I'm like, So, of course, I'm going to be curious. So I find some of the consumers that were ordering, and I call them, which, they were shocked. Someone's calling me about my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So I get one guy, and he's a lawyer in New York. And he says, I love peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. He says, I found you guys online. I said, well, why wouldn't you make one at home or bring it? He goes, I bill $700 an hour. I'm not going anywhere but at my desk.
Yeah.
So he says, if I go down or I go anywhere, or even if I spend time making the sandwich, but if I go down to the restaurant to get it, he says, I just lost an hour of time. He says, you could charge me $50 a sandwich. He says, and I would order
still saving money.
Because that's his propensity to purchase, right? Then we had another store that was getting orders at 5 a.m. I'm like, and only on Fridays. And I'm like, that's odd. So same customer every week. Well, single dad, had his kids on Thursday nights. He would order peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on Friday morning, and that's what the kids got for lunch on the way to school. So again, you think about it's an interesting model, the delivery model, because it's a convenience model, right? Overall, when you look at it, like people order based on convenience. I can order, I can get it right to me. There's a lot of things that are happening, right? But even to the point that here's a single dad who's saying, I'm not going to buy peanut butter and jelly and make the sandwiches. I'm just going to order them on Thursday because I have the kids on Friday. I have them on Thursday night into Friday morning. Why would I? It's much easier for me to do this. It's convenience. So you never know what everybody's looking for. And I would have never thought that, even though I've been a single dad and woke up on Friday mornings making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. You would think I would have even thought that, but I didn't even think about that. And it made me laugh that's what it was. So
for the record, peanut butter and jelly is fine, but the play is peanut butter and Mike's hot honey. That's the play.
Maybe we'll have to add one of those to our repertoire. Our most popular seller, believe it or not, in that category is a French toast peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I can see that.
You probably wouldn't make it home. So yeah. I get it. Right?
No, that's awesome. Well, listen, Kirk, I loved having you on the show. You've been a great guest. Let me ask you this before we wrap up. If people want to learn more about you and about your company, how can they get in touch? How can they learn more?
Well, they can reach us on LinkedIn under either my name, Kirk Mauriello, or under Profit Cookers. You'll see we also have a page there. Awesome. They can reach us through our website at www.profitcookers.com, or they can reach me via email at kirk@virtualprofitcooker.com. Awesome.
And for folks out there in the audience, as always, I'll keep those in the show notes, so don't crash your cars trying to write them down. Kirk, again, I deeply appreciate you coming on the show. You're welcome back anytime. And between now and next week, continue being awesome out there.
Thank you, Jerry. It was great being with you today.
You're welcome. Thanks, Kirk.